You're listening to Tremendous Leadership with Dr. Tracy Jones.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Tremendous Leadership, Leaders on Leadership podcast, where we pull back the curtain on leadership and ask leaders of all ages and stages about what it takes to truly pay the price of leadership. And I'm excited to introduce you to our guest today, Brian Hennon. Brian, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Well, I always like telling our listeners how we connected. And Brian reminded me we went way back. We connected through a mutual friend, Jeff Payton. Jeff, if you're listening, and you probably will because you're one of our tremendous fans. Thanks so much for connecting us. And then recently, I had written a blog about called Seat 2A. And I remember Brian responded to that, and we just reconnected. He was nearby me in South Central Pennsylvania, and he has also gone through a tremendous transition in his life vocationally and actually written a book, so I want to talk about that. But let me tell you about Brian. Brian, of course, as I said, he's an author. He's a leader. And are you ready? He's an end-of-life educator. We're going to talk about his book then. He spent 22 years in pastoral leadership before transitioning into the healthcare field. Brian's passion is to help people face the end of their lives with joy and hope. Brian, I am so excited to have you here to talk about the price of leadership.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
You're welcome. Well, we'll get right into it. You talk about transitioning the lives. We're going to talk about Charles's speech, my father's speech, The Price of Leadership. And boy, I'll tell you, he pounded leadership hard, very pragmatic. But then he also showed us how to pass on to glory in just the most spectacular way. So I know you're going to share a little bit about that. Brian, the first price that my father talked about in paying the price of leadership was loneliness. And, we've heard that heavy is the head that wears the crown, and it's lonely at the top. But for you and your leadership journey, either as a pastor or as an end-of-life educator, can you unpack what paying the price of loneliness means for you?
Yeah. So as a pastor, I spent about 15 years as a youth pastor, another 5 years as a lead pastor. The lead pastor was probably the loneliest because it was a church planting situation. And my wife and I did it together, felt the Lord was calling us to do it. It was one of the probably 5 of the most difficult years of my life overall. And at the end of that little over 5 years, we were just extraordinarily burnt out. And we had a lot of friends around us, a lot of good people around us who are a handful of good people around us, not a lot, who really, they encouraged us, they built us up, they tried to help us as much as they could, but they couldn't understand the full weight of what we were going through. I mean, this is something we felt we were called to do. This is something we felt God wanted us to do. And we really believe that, and God made that clear in many different ways through several different people. But it was a very lonely, very difficult time. So the transition out of full-time ministry back in 2016, 2017 into end-of-life care, which I work in hospice, but I'm called a business development director, but it sounds so horrible. It sounds very strange with hospice. So.
Yes, it does.
but my team and my role and my team's role is primarily education. There is such a lack of education about end of life, a lack of education about hospice, a lack of education about the progression of disease. Physicians don't like to talk about it. Physicians don't like to give up. They would tell us all the time. So there's a lot of leadership involved in that as well. I lead a team of about 10 people who do this on a daily basis. They meet with families, they meet with physicians, they meet with personal care home administrators, they meet with, you name it, they meet with them. And they do a lot of education. So I help kind of guide that team through that process.
I love it. So you talked about loneliness and you said the full weight. And a lot of times when we are responding to the call, other people are outside and we're leaning into them as we're supposed to, but they don't. I think of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. You sense it, but then you fall asleep because you're not sweating blood. And I've been through that. And how did you get through that? I mean, I know you have the calling, but what advice would you give to our listeners out there? Because it is tough, even if you're in the calling, and maybe you have a few. I like how you went from we had a lot to a few, because we've all been. Thank you for your transparency and honesty. Yeah. What do you do? What would you recommend?
So My recommendation is to find one person who can be can be your advocate, can be your support. You can be dead honest with them, and just speak your mind to them and speak your heart to them. I have a very good friend of mine. His name is Pastor Ben Maxey. He's a pastor at Living Water Community Church, and Ben was one of my, I wouldn't say an advocate. He was my listener. We would go to lunch and he would just hear my heart and hear what I was struggling with. He didn't try to give me advice unless I asked for it. He just listened, and very godly man. And when I needed advice, he gave it to me, and it was always good.
Yeah.
So,
I love that you said one. And I've always said that I'll go into any battle, but I have to have at least one. And I love that listener. That is such a beautiful, because I think sometimes we think, well, they're going to, I don't want to hear it because then they're going to expect me to say something. And, Jesus listened to broken hearts, and I think of Mary. And so we just do that too. So thank you for sharing that, going through that loneliness phase. And then of course you alluded to it with burnout, weariness. And Charles would always say to me, Tracy, whenever you are called to leadership, there's going to be people that really do more than what you've asked them to, but the vast majority are going to do less, and it's going to be tiring. So how did you get through that season? 5 years is a long time, Brian.
So not only, if you have any church planters on this pod, listening to this podcast, they can relate. Not only are you a pastor, not only are you a preacher, but you're a real estate agent, you're a facilities director. In the 5 years we were a church plant, we were called the Refuge Community Church. I think we were kicked out of 5, 6 or 7 buildings. Every time we would find a new building, they would get sold, and then I would have to find a new building that could house, 50 to 100 people. And another building we went to, and I won't mention the township, but they told us we weren't allowed to be in the building because it wasn't zoned right. So multiple things happened. And so not only was I a pastor, but it was all kinds of things that I was trying to do, all while navigating. The people we had were good people, and the majority of them loved Jesus and they loved the church. But helping people understand the vision and being able to come behind that vision, and maybe that was a lacking in my leadership to be able to do that. But it's a very difficult task to stay on mission, and it's very tiring and very wearing. I don't know what the word is. Tiring.
Wearisome. Yeah. Well,
that's it. Wearisome. That's it.
Well, vision is the fourth one, so we're going to circle back to that because it is tiring. And I love that you owned it and said it could be a failure on my part. I don't consider myself a visionary. I'm a doer. I always struggle with this, and I'm like, I know that people probably aren't into it because I'm not doing this correctly or clear enough. But thank God we got the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Otherwise, oh boy, nobody would come alongside us. But I really appreciate you spelling that out. And I love that you said that you were physically weary because you're the refugee, you're the nomad going from place to place. And I'm sure there are other people listening to this call. Maybe it's their home, maybe it's their job where they feel like they just can't land and feel stable and secure. So I really hope that your words land with them and they realize you're not alone in going through this. And this is a season. And you will land at your home. I promise you that. It always works out in the end. Loneliness, weariness, the third price he talked about is abandonment. And it's not like fear of abandonment or giving up a pet to a pet shelter, but it was going all in. And I can remember my father telling me that he did more in a day to contribute to him being a failure than a success. And for those of you that know my father, you're like, what? And he was like, no, if you really break down every minute of the day into like ledger, credits and debits, I focus on what I like and want to do, not what I ought and should do. And that's laser focused on abandonment. So how do you do that in leadership when you're tired, when you have people that don't feel the full weight and you're running from place to place?
Yep. So in my current role, I mean, it's to me, it's real simple. Yes, I'm a business development director, but our goal is to take care of people. Really, that's our primary goal, is to take care of people. And obviously within that structure is, Medicare regulations and all kinds of things that we have to follow. But the primary goal is to take care of people. And that includes the people that report to me, the people who are under me. I have to be able to help them, as they struggle with their own personality, conflicts and things like that. I have to understand them and understand who they are. And that's very tiresome too sometimes. So, but, sometimes as a leader, you just want to say something and people do it, right? And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
it, right? You don't have to explain the why. You don't have to motivate them. You don't have to cast the vision for that. You just want them to do it. And but that's not human nature. I'm not that way. Like you said, I want to spend the day doing the things that I'm good at, not the things that I'm not good at, right? So, and those things that I'm not necessarily gifted at doing, they wear on you, and you become tired, and you feel that like the weight of that abandonment, I guess, is what you're saying. When you're outside of your comfort zone, but that's where you grow. I have grown more as a leader, and this isn't a slight against the church, but I've grown more as a leader outside of the church than I did inside of the church. In the secular arena, I've had some wonderful leaders, some very amazing leaders who weren't believers, but they spoke truth into my life. And I mean, I'm a firm believer that truth is truth, right? It's God's truth. And Jesus is the way and the truth. But if somebody speaks truth into your life, you take it. And, I've worked under leaders in the secular arena who didn't have my best interests at heart as well. But the ones who did, there's a saying on LinkedIn, I see it once in a while, that you always remember that one leader who gave you a shot, that one person who, and that is absolutely the truth in my life. So I don't know if I answered the question or not.
Oh, you absolutely did. And I mean, staying on point needs to, you need to find that voice that's going to help you, that clarion call, that champion. And, you said it, there's going to be a lot of other things coming in from different angles, muddying the waters. But as you said, you took it all in and you broke it down and unpacked it and said, this person is speaking truth and this person is not. And I'm going to follow, based on that. So no, I love that. Because as leaders, oh boy, do we get input. A lot of it unsolicited, but I'm like, really?
Some of it anonymous.
Yeah, I don't even know you, kind of thing. But some of it, I don't like that. I'm like, oh my God. But it's one of those things where you have to be abandoned to searching for the truth too, to stay on point. So I love it. Yeah. So lastly, again, vision. And again, I grew up watching these people like Ken Blanchard and Zig Ziglar, and I'm like, man, what do they got? What did they take as kids? I'm okay, but. And my dad was like, vision is just seeing what needs to be done and doing it. He was always so pragmatic about stuff. And I'm like, yes, see what needs to be done and do it. So talk to us about the vision and the mission. How do we stay on point? Everybody struggles with it.
Right. I mean, as believers, our mission is real simple, right? I mean, it's to love God and to love people. That's our mission. And we complicate that so much in the church world, outside of the church world. I think we conflate mission with vision, with personal opinion, all of those things. And really that mission is simple, right? What are the two greatest commandments? To love God with all our heart, soul, strength, and mind, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. And if you do that, I love when Scripture says you fulfill the law. In that you fulfill the law, right? You fulfill what God wants us to do by doing those. Now, there's all kinds of ways we can do that. I used to think as a young pastor that, I can only do this as a pastor, right? I can only do these things in full-time ministry. And when I got transitioning out of 20 some years as a pastor, it was a very difficult time because I'd always been Pastor Brian, always. I had never been anything but Pastor Brian. And at least for, pretty much my entire adult life, now I wasn't Pastor Brian. And I had to figure out my identity outside of that. And really my identity is Jesus. My identity is what he's called me to do. And that's to love him and to love people. And I can do that anywhere. And I know there are pastors out there who might, say, they fear abandoning their call, right? But the ultimate call that we have as believers is to follow Jesus, wherever that takes us. Yes. So I don't know if I answered the question again.
No. I love that. And I love that you said that. And I love that you talked about your identity was in your title. I think anybody that's left, like when we leave the military, I'm like, I don't have a rank in front of my name anymore. And it feels weird. And I don't know who, am I?
You were high up there too. You were a major, I think, weren't you?
Oh yeah. Well, that's mid-level, but but thank you for saying that. Well, I don't rank my husband, so that's just the main point.
I love it. I love it.
Anyways, but he's a Marine, so he can still whoop me. You know what I'm saying?
That's true. Does he eat crayons though? I gotta ask that.
No, yes, he does. Yeah, Uncle Sam's misguided children, kind of thing. So yeah, he's a crayon eater. But I love that you talked about, the ultimate. The one thing is to love it and wherever. And Charles would always say that too. We're all in full-time ministry, even the layperson. You're out there. When you're a vessel for Christ, you can be a vessel anywhere. And even when you're not behind the pulpit, everybody's always watching you and that kind of thing. So no, I greatly appreciate that. I want to talk about that. How did you get the calling from pastoral ministry to what you're doing right now in healthcare?
So my grandfather, I have a working title for another book. It's called Every Road Leads Somewhere. My grandfather, when he was in his late 80s, was struggling with some dementia, and I didn't know it at the time because I didn't see him often. But I was in Pittsburgh with him, and my grandmother sent us to the store, and it took us what should have been about 15 minutes was about 45 minutes to get home because he couldn't remember where to go. And I said, Pap, are we lost? And he said, you're never lost. Every road leads somewhere, right? Oh. So that's kind of been, so when you ask me what was the call out of full-time ministry, it was more out of necessity. Yeah. My goal when we shut our church plant down was to be a pastor again within a year. And so I was looking for something, because I was burnt out, I was looking for something temporary, something that just a holdover job. And I had, part of my resume is I was 6 years in the Army National Guard as a public affairs specialist. So I went to Defense Information School. I was a journalist. I was a writer. And so I thought, I can fall back on that. Well, that plus my Bible education at Lancaster Bible College, I thought I'd be a shoo-in for a new job. Well, 87 resumes and 87 rejections later, I was at a local warehouse applying to be a warehouse picker at 46 years old, which is not beneath me, but it's not something I wanted to do. Right. And not necessarily something I felt I was physically ready to do either, to pick packages all day. But a friend of mine who was he was a bivocational pastor named Tim. Tim was pastoring a church called Resonate Church in Carlisle, and he called me up. His wife, and this is how God works. And God's so amazing because he connects us with people 1 year that we don't think is really mean. It's a connection, but it's what was the purpose of it, right? And I was connected with Tim's wife, Mary. She was the managing director of New Hope Ministries, and we volunteered there, and as a church and as a church family. And when I left ministry, she talked to her husband, said, this guy needs a job. Tim worked in a particular hospice agency as an end-of-life educator. His goal was to educate people who were at or approaching end of life and to talk to them about hospice. He called me one day and said, I hear you need a job. I said, I absolutely do. He said, well, let's meet for dinner. We met for dinner. He explained the job to me. I honestly knew nothing. I didn't really know what he was talking about. I didn't know anything about healthcare. I didn't know anything about hospice.
Oh, really? Were your parents still around, or you hadn't seen anything?
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. I had no experience with hospice at all.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. Go on.
No, that's okay. But I needed a job and I needed health insurance for my family. So I'm like, sure, I'll do it. I mean, after almost 100 resumes getting rejected, right? So I did it. And I'll tell you, I was in orientation with Tim in our office in Mechanicsburg, and we got a call from a family. The gentleman had liver cancer, and it was about right at the end of the day, it was about 5 o'clock. He had liver cancer. His wife called. He had been on home health care, which is different than hospice, obviously. Home health is more curative in nature. Hospice is more comfort focused. So anyway, we got this call. They needed help. Oh no, we got the call from the nurse, one of our nurses. She said, this family needs your help. So Tim and I drove out to their house. It was 5:30, 5:45 by the time we got there. The gentleman was sleeping on a couch because he couldn't sleep in a bed. He had to be propped up. Sure. He was in pain. His wife was sleeping in a chair, not even a reclining chair, next to keep him from falling out of the couch. And so we walked in, and Tim not immediately, but we started talking about hospice and what all we could provide. And the wife looked at us and said, why has no one told me about this? What? No one has told me that I can get this kind of help and that he can be comfortable. And And so when he, after Tim had explained everything to her, in hospice, we have the three legs of a stool. There's people, there's medication, and there's equipment. And I know you've gone through this with your family. So, and those are the three-legged stool, and it's all covered by Medicare. And when we explained that to her, she started crying. She was like, I don't understand why my doctor didn't tell me this. Why my the hospital didn't tell me this. And the reality is, it's not a comfortable topic. Nobody wants to talk about it. So anyway, that was kind of where I started to feel like this was my new calling, that this is what I was meant to do. And then in my book, which you read, there's a couple stories in there that really kind of confirmed that in my heart. So, yeah.
Well, let's talk about the book, okay?
Yeah.
The title of the book is called Find the Joy at the End of the Journey.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times I work with people that are on like their third or fourth careers, so they think that, but this is the real end of the journey. And your tagline is finding joy and honoring God with end-of-life decisions. And folks, we connected, he sent me an email, he sends me this link, thank you for the book. I immediately read it. I woke up at 5:45 that morning because you're like, are you okay? Because I sent you an email and a review. Like, oh my gosh, Tracy might have said, I got to call hospice right now. And, I read it, I put a review on it, but folks, you got to get it. I have had a lot of bad things happen in my life, but one of the things I am most grateful for, two of them, was that I was there with my parents, both of them, in hospice care when they passed to glory. And you talk about that three-legged stool. And I mean, it is just everything we do now from birth on is preparing for dying well and getting things in order. So Brian, can you tell us a little bit about the book? And in particular, I want you to share the point about the 81 days.
Yeah. So first of all, I had a thought, it just went out of my head. Oh my goodness
That happens to me
anyway,
all the time. I'm like, that's why I scribble down stuff, and I'm like, it's going to be gone in a minute. Okay, so we were talking about the book and me waking up and you saying it. Okay.
Yeah, so the genesis of the book, where it all came from, and I share this story in there, was I was in a room with a family, and their pastor came in. This family didn't. Their mom.
Yes, this is a good one.
She had not left any wishes. She didn't tell them what she wanted. Yeah. Which, to your listeners, to those who are watching, please make sure you have a plan. Make sure you have a living will. There's all kinds of tools out there. At the end, we'll Tracy will share some contact information. Love to talk to you about how to make a plan. Because to me, that's the most loving thing to do for my family, so that they know the decisions they need to make. But so the reason for the book was I was in this room and their pastor came in, and he was a young guy, probably in his 30s, maybe late 20s. And I had been there. I was in his shoes at one point. I'm in my mid 50s now. But when the one family member asked him for advice, what should we do? He said, I don't know. Let's pray. Right. and I'm all for praying, and I'm all for asking God for wisdom. But, in the book, I talk about, we know that God gives us wisdom in three different ways, right? Through the word, through experience, and through other people. Right. And he didn't draw on any of that. But I don't fault him for that, because again, in Bible, I went to Lancaster Bible College, wonderful school, but we didn't have any classes on this. We had no classes on how to shepherd people through end of life. And if you talk to most pastors, most of them haven't. There's one gentleman I know, he's a pastor in the Free Lutheran denomination. They did have classes on this, to their credit. So, but most of them don't. They teach us how to shepherd through all kinds of things, marriages, and how to do funerals, but not
We're celebrating recovery.
So that's where the book came from. It was really and there are a few other resources out there, but they're very long and very technical, and they feel very drawn out to me. So I always believe brevity is better. So I wanted to be really short, really succinct, and make it easy to read for people. But really draw on scripture too, because the reality is we're all going to die. Right. Every one of us. There's whether we talk about it or not, it's going to happen, right? Unless Jesus comes back. So, which I hope he does. But if he doesn't, but to your question about the 81 days, it's amazing to me. One of the things I've learned, and one of the things we try to educate people a lot is, I think I do use President Jimmy Carter in the book. We talk about him, I think, in the book. Jimmy Carter was on hospice for almost 2 years. He came on hospice in February of 2023, I think, and was discharged or passed away in December of 2024. So almost 2 years on hospice. Because when most people think about hospice, they think, oh, I'm going to die tomorrow, right? And it's really not. Well, yes, it's an end of life benefit. Yes, you have to have a diagnosis of 6 months or less to live. There isn't one doctor, one human being who can tell me how long I have left. So I might have 6 months. I don't know.
Right. There's a verse about that.
So one of the first objections we always get is, well, I'm not dying. And I always tell people, no, we all are, right? We're all dying. Right. So, but here's the reality. A lot of the people I interact with, they're in and out of the hospital 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And they continue to decline in spite of that. So is the hospital really helping? Is medication really helping? And the answer is no, it's not. So it's real. And so there are studies that show, peer-reviewed studies, that those who choose a comfort-focused approach to life, they're sick, they're in and out of the hospital, they decide they don't want aggressive treatment anymore. They don't want to go to the hospital anymore. They don't want to be, pumped full of medication anymore. They decide they want to be comfortable. Studies show that they can live up to 81 with heart failure, 81 days longer with comfort-focused care rather than curative-focused care. That's an amazing statistic to me, because you think about what can happen in 81 days, right? I mean, the amount of reconciliation, the amount of family, you can spend time with your family. Think about President Carter again. In those 2 years, he got to spend with his family. He got to spend with his wife, Rosalind, when she passed away. Had he not chosen that, I don't know what would have happened, but he may have been in the hospital and he may have missed out on a lot of those. So I think when we talk about, and in the book, we talk about stewarding our time, there's going to come a point where I have to decide what's the best use of my time: going to the hospital, going to physicians, going to specialists, getting treatment, or staying home and being with my family. And that's to your point about the question about the 81 days. So
yeah, that was really quite profound for me, because again, I'm in the thing, my parents are in glory, but I mean, everybody's going through this, and Mike's parents are gone, but we're losing older siblings, and then we're going to be next up. we're the next generation up to hit it. So it was just really impactful to me. And I love what you said, as a believer, all the Christians out there, and if you're not, and you're thinking, oh, Tracy, I don't know if I can be as certain as you. Yes, you can. We can talk more about that, but I don't fear death, but the dying. And I'm like, can I just go in my sleep and wake up and go, please, God, just let me be one of those people. And, it's just one of those things that you articulated that in the book, but all your book is about end of life decisions. You make them now. We make decisions our whole life. And then I've heard people say, well, I'm not going to be around. Somebody else will have to deal with it. And I'm like, seriously? I mean, that is not right. You make the decision now. Otherwise, the state will. And the bottom line is, and you talk about stewardship at the end, the bottom line is too, we're standing at the Bema seat with everything that we've accumulated on this earth, and what have we done with it? And if in the end we just say, well, it goes wherever the wind blows, just scatter my wealth and whatever.
Right.
That's not good stewardship, and that's going to burn up, and we're going to have to answer for that. So end of life decisions are some of the most important, other than, what did Charles say? The 3 decisions: who you're going to live your life with, what are you going to live your life doing, and who you're going to live your life for. I would end a 4th decision. Well, that'll be our next book, Brian, that you can write. I know a good publisher. What do we do with the end of our life decisions? So I'm sorry, go on.
No. That you're absolutely right. And I think as believers, so there was a story I share in the book. I met a woman who had lung cancer. I believe it was advanced lung cancer. And when I went into her hospital room, I was asked to come in by the physician, and her Bible study group had just been in. And she told them that she was done. She wanted to go home. She didn't want treatment. And they told her she lacked faith. Oh. And she asked me what I thought about that. And I said, so help me understand this. You lack faith by saying no more treatment, which treatment can be good. It's God has blessed us with a wonderful medical establishment, wonderful doctors and nurses, but it has its limits. And so she was choosing to say no more limited treatment, no more aggressive, and I'm going to put my future and my healing fully in the hands of God. And I said, so you tell me who has more faith. And she said, so you're saying I have more faith by doing this? And I said, yes, I think you do. And she goes, can I tell my friends that? I'm like, you can tell anything you want. I said, but that's the reality. And we equate and we conflate medical treatment with faith in God.
Yeah.
And the two are completely different.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, it's said in church, and I used to say it as a pastor, right? We many times we confuse the gift with the giver, right? Medical treatment is a gift, but it's not the giver. Right. And God is ultimately the one who heals us. So, and so, yeah, I think like you said, I'm not afraid of death. I'm a little hesitant about the dying process.
Yeah,
right.
I love how you said that, because that's really because we're all getting older. I'm a little older than you. And I always think, and then I'm like, no, and you really helped me articulate that. And so, okay, so if my thing is to die well, I'm going to take care of my finances. I'm going to make sure my wills are updated. I'm going to make sure my wish that I already know now is to pass in my home. So I have set up things to make sure that I have the resources and the decision making, that is how it's going to happen. You know, where are the pets going to, so that if it happens and when it happens, I feel like I have exited. And the other thing is, you know, as a pastor and as a leadership person that teaches people to get stuff done, my biggest fear is that I pass and have all my crap in the wind, or like, you know, just closets full of, and people would be like, boy, Tracy sure talked a good line, but if you really looked underneath her life, well, that's crazy. And so I hate to say that, but I'm like, no, I got to get stuff, my ship squared away in all things.
Right.
I know it's kind of
but
weird.
at the end of the day, really, you're going to be in glory. It's all gain for you, right?
I know. But still, I don't want them to meet my friends in heaven and then they go, wow, thanks for, let me clean out your 50 pairs of cowboy boots, although they'll probably like that. So just saying.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm getting silly, but I love it, Brian. And then I love how you talked about hospice. You can go in and out of hospice. I think people think, no, you got to be like a week or less. They're in hospice. So, no, and you can go out and go visit and do things. You can come into palliative care and back and forth. So, and my father, Charles, he lived with the cancer. He got diagnosed at 70. He died 1 week shy of 81. So he went through a lot of things. But towards the end, he's like, please stop, everybody stop praying for healing. And he said, I'm not doing any more treatment. And I remember he told me some people were upset. And I said, no, we have to honor that. He's ready to go home.
His choice.
It's his choice. We always talk about my body, my choice. Okay. And I'm going to say something else. You brought this up. Assisted suicide. This is not assisted suicide. No, that is we're not even going to go into that. When I say my body, my choice, and I love that you said this is biblically letting God make the decision.
Yeah.
And yes, you have a say in that, but I want our listeners to know this does not go into that, nor should it.
Right. Well, I think there's two things the ways I look at that. One, assisted suicide is an artificially hastening death.
Yes.
But there's also artificially lengthening life, right? I mean, in reality, a lot of the treatment that a lot of people get, it's artificial, right? It's keeping them alive, and in a sense, right? Obviously, God knows when I'm gonna go, but the repeated hospitalizations, the repeated surgeries. There's a well-known pastor, and I won't say who he was, but he just passed away recently. And I read an article about him. In his late 80s, in his last year of life, he had over 4 surgeries. Now, if you think about it, his last year of life was spent in the hospital or in rehab. And instead of being at home, instead of, his last year of life, and I'm not judging him, but was spent trying to lengthen his life. And I don't want to spend the last year of my life doing that. So yeah, so hospice, back to that, what you said was, yes, it can be, you can come in and out of hospice. It's not ideal, but you will have patients who will come out of the hospital. And again, this is a hard decision. It's a difficult discussion. And so they may not they're ready for hospice, but there's still that fear in their heart. So they come out and they start getting symptomatic, or they get short of breath. They call an ambulance because that's their natural inclination. That's what we're told to do. The hospital, they get admitted to the hospital. they have to discharge hospice once they go to the hospital, because hospice is paid for the same way the hospital is. It's paid for by Medicare Part A for Medicare patients. So, and Medicare will not pay for both at the same time. So they have to discharge hospice or revoke it. But when they come back out of the hospital, they can start hospice again. Now, there's the caveat to that is, if it happens too many times, then things get flagged, right? And because we want to Medicare, then this patient isn't necessarily ready for hospice if they keep going back and forth to the hospital, right? And so that's when we have that conversation with the family, like, maybe you're not quite ready yet. Yeah. So, but yeah, so you can come.
You would talk to them because you, as you said, with that family, with the guy with the liver failure, even before, did you set him up for hospice or just home health care?
No, we set him up for hospice. So we got him set up for hospice. He actually passed away pretty quickly, but yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's just one of those things that, knowledge is power. And, but as I was reading that, it's very strange because my experience with hospice, and everybody I know that's passed, has been, once you go, I think the longest I ever saw anybody in hospice was a month. So in my mind, I'm like, a month, maybe a little longer. But recently, I was talking to a guy. I took an Uber. I flew out to Asheville and was speaking, and the guy at the Uber was on hospice. The storm happened in Asheville, that horrific storm 2 years ago. All his oxygen and stuff was knocked out, and his body decided, I'm either going to expire or I'm going to get better. And he got better. He was driving my Uber. Right. He was, And then my neighbor was telling me her sister was in hospice, and I'm like, how's your sister? And they're like, she's better. She stopped all this medicine and stuff. Again, I am not anti-medicine, but it's just weird now that a lot of people are saying, like you said, listen, enough is enough. On one hand, I love medicine, but I also love the fact that God made this unbelievable body that has so many redundant systems and healing powers that sometimes in both of these cases, it was like when they just stepped away from all the stuff that was being done, the ship had a chance to right itself. And I'm not saying that's always going to happen, because this is only 2 stories that I've heard in the past year. But I thought, when I read you saying about that, I'm like, that's good to know, because I'm sure there are other people who have heard more and more instances of it.
Yeah. Well, you think about it's for someone who's got a life-limiting illness, whether it's heart failure, cancer, dementia, especially dementia patients, those repeated trips back and forth to the hospital, they will cause, many times what we see is that it hastens the decline because of the stress. You think about the stress of going to the hospital, the stress of, and especially for someone with dementia they're already confused, and now you're taking them out of their home, putting them in the hospital. And what we see families more often than not say is, every time mom goes to the hospital or dad goes to the hospital, he gets worse. Right? And it's not the hospital's fault. It's the environment's fault, right? So.
Well, I'm so glad you're bringing that up, because I forget I'm reading a book on Alzheimer's research and, all that stuff. Well, and not just that, there's fraud and abuse everywhere. I mean, it's like anything man touches is going to be corrupt. And so, so let's just say that. But this book is particularly on that. And you just think about that. But one of the things is, when you pull them out of their element, it's incredibly disorienting. And so I just say that I want to call that out to people, because I'm sure everybody listening to this podcast has at least somebody they know that is going through some kind of mild cognitive impairment, Alzheimer's or dementia. And just knowing that you think you're trying to help them, but that is incredibly unsettling if you've ever worked with anybody with it. So they don't get it, and then they get home and they're like, what was that about? And you got to reset. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a big deal. I hope that gives somebody some insight if they're struggling with it. So and if you're struggling with it, you need to reach out to Brian. So Brian, tell people the best way to get a hold of you.
So it's my email is Brian, Brian, at hopefulhope.org. That's my website if you'd like. Yep. So it's funny that the name for Hopeful Hope came about when I was a young pastor. I was 24, 25 something. There was a woman in our church, 30 some years old, who was dying of breast cancer. The pastor, who was a very conservative, Bob Jones kind of guy, we went to pray for her. And I prayed a very hesitant, God, if you want to heal her, God, if it's your will, heal her. And he prayed heaven down. I'll never forget it. I thought Jesus was going to show up in the room right then. And when we got in the car, I said, aren't you afraid of giving false hope? And he said, there is no such thing. He said, hope is always hopeful. So that's where I got that name, hopeful hope. It's always hopeful when Christ is involved, especially. Right? Hope is always hopeful, right? In my book, I'm a Pirate fan, Pittsburgh Pirate fan, and at the beginning of every season, I'm hopeful, but it always gets dashed by mid-April, mid-May, right? But it's that the hope we have in Christ is so different. It's a certain hope. It's a sure hope. It's not I hope it's going to happen, or I guess it's going to happen. This is going to happen based on what God has already done and what he did on Calvary with the cross. He's already fulfilled his promise. He already made good on his promise, right? And we can trust him to make good on the rest. So yeah, I don't want to preach.
I hope everybody hung out for the whole rest of it, because I think that was the best part. Oh my gosh. I know you had said that, but I forgot about you saying, because people ask me to pray and I'm like, how all in do I go? I mean, what if it doesn't happen? And it's like, Tracy, you're not Nostradamus. Stop it.
Nope.
You know, I thank you for that. Pray with certainty, because it's already done. You know, this death is just temporary. We're all going to go through it, but thank you for that.
Yep.
Brian, we talked a lot about leadership. Any other thoughts that we did not get to cover that you'd like to leave with our fans?
So first of all, just something that popped into my head while we were talking. If any of your listeners are pastors or they're in ministry and they're struggling, not that I want everybody to drop out of ministry and stop being a pastor, but if you're in a place where you're burnt out, I want you to know that there is hope outside of full-time ministry. There really is. I'm in year 11 of my temporary job.
I'm in
and
year 17 of mine. I love it.
Everything's temporary, obviously, ultimately. But if you're a pastor and struggling and you're thinking I'm a failure, you're not. So that's the first thing that popped into my head. You know, if you've done what God's called you to do, and obviously you've done it imperfectly because we're imperfect people. But, you know, just trust that God knows that every road leads somewhere, right? So that God's got a plan for you. And I think to those who are listening, who are struggling with my loved one or with her own health, that sort of thing. I think it's the final chapter in my book where the principle of gain, you know, to live is Christ, to die is gain. There is nothing in heaven, nothing in the next life that won't be gain for me, right? There's not going to be, I wish this would have happened. I wish I would have done more of this. It's gain. And then the other flip side of that, and I don't want to keep belaboring this, is for those who are afraid to go because you're going to leave loved ones behind, we have to trust that it's going to be gain for them too. That God loves them more than I do. That God cares for them more than I do. And even though I want to see my daughter get married, I want to see my son get married, I want to see my grandchildren, if he chooses to take me, it's going to be gain for them. It's going to be hard, but it's still going to be gain for them. So I think ultimately what I hope people get from this is, whether in leadership or not, we've got to trust God. He knows what's best. He showed us he knows what's best, and he shows us. You know, what was I forget which philosopher said, "What's the greatest truth you've ever heard in your life?" And he said, "Jesus loves me. This I know, for the Bible tells me so." And we've got to trust in that. And there's no reason not to.
Gain, and I love that you said eats not just for us, of course, you know, but for the ones left behind, because he's a just God and he's a loving God and he's already seen it to the end. So, well, I thought the other ending was good, but now I resend that and I said, oh, Brian, well, I can't wait to connect. We're neighbors, you know, in South
Absolutely.
And we'll talk about your next book, because I love it. Every road does lead somewhere. Thank you for pouring into so many and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you.
Brian, I just can't thank you enough. Again, folks, this is Brian Hennon, hopefulhope.org, and the name of his book is, and we'll have the link in here, The Joy at the End of the Journey, Finding Joy and Honoring God with End-of-Life Decisions. It's a quick read. You can pick it up on Kindle or get a copy. Read it. I don't care if you're 50. I don't care if you're 40, because the more you know now, then you got that taken care of, because we don't know. You know, we don't know when the Lord's going to call us home or call you both home together. So just to our tremendous fans out there, we thank you so much for being a part of this. We hope you were inspired, encouraged, affirmed, and educated. And if you like what you heard, please hit the like button. If you would do us the honor of a review, that helps everybody know what they're listening to and how it impacted you. That really is the highest compliment you can give us. And again, Brian, Charles always said that you'll be the same person 5 years from now, except for two things: the people you meet and the books you read. You all have just met the tremendous Brian Hennon, and I hope you read, as I did, The Joy at the End of the Journey, and I hope you grab a copy of The Price of Leadership too. Thank you, everybody, so much. Have a tremendous rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Tremendous Leadership with Dr. Tracy Jones. Find out more about Dr. Jones at www.tremendousleadership.com. If you've been ignited by something you heard in this episode, let us know by leaving a review for Tremendous Leadership wherever you listen to podcasts, or by sending us a message through www.tremendousleadership.com.